Well, hello again, guys, and welcome to the not-so-mean streets of Helsinki. Yeah, they're a pretty welcoming bunch here, and what a safe capital city it is. I always find in Scandinavia the locals are very happy, and you'd be doing well to have a smile on your face, actually, given the weather here today. But we are going to attempt to have some fun, because I asked for your questions on Newcastle United, and I'm going to go through them. Thanks to all of you who replied there. Now, I'm not too sure what this guy behind us, what he's pondering. Are Newcastle going to go back in for Guehi, perhaps? That is one of the questions. But yeah, without any further ado, let's have a little bit of a wander. And I've got the questions noted down here on my Radisson Blue notepaper, so forgive me when I do look off camera. But we'll kick off straight away with Dom Lyons. Is there internal recognition from Eddie Howe and those above him of the need to adapt to a possession-based style? Will technicality be prioritised in the transfer market? Now, to answer this, I think you can actually go back 2 years, and this was coming out of the season when Newcastle did tremendously well, playing a really pragmatic football under Eddie Howe, where they ceded possession to the opposition. This was the season when they escaped relegation, of course. And yeah, they played to their strengths, and even into this season, where Newcastle finished fourth in the league, there still wasn't really that evolution to what Dom suggests in the question. There was a pragmatism there. Now, in the summer, when Newcastle brought in Sandro Tonali, and we spoke with Eddie Howe about this, what was the reason, what was the thinking behind that? And it was all coming back to that word evolution. And to talk to Dom's point, yes, they wanted to be more possession-based. There was a realisation and an acceptance that to be a top team, to be a team who competes against the very best and dominates the opposition, if you like, you needed to have more of the ball than what Newcastle had. Now, one player doesn't change all of that, and of course they lost Tonali last year anyway to the gambling ban, so that plan went up in smoke. But the issue I've got with this is that Newcastle don't have enough players to play like that. And if you look at Sean Longstaff and Joe Willock, very good players in their own right, even throw Joe Linton into that, they're never really going to be part of a team who dominates the ball, are they? They're not going to be part of a side who teases, passes around, has got that patient approach, plays in front of the opposition if they're sitting deep. And even the wingers, you look at Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, they're different too. If you look at Manchester City, the ultimate exponents of this sort of control and patience. They've got Jack Grealish, Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden, wide players in number 10 who do keep the ball, who do tease those passes around. Now, Gordon and Barnes are perhaps, for me, more suited to playing on the transition. Even Alexander Isak is that type of centre forward, I think, as well. So I've used this word before. I've had a lot of Newcastle's players, in some ways, when you look at the qualities of the likes of Bruno Guimaraes and Tonali, it's a little bit of a contradiction with what else goes around them. So to that end, I think there is a want, and I think there is a need to bring in players of greater technical ability. But while the squad at the moment is a little bit of a mismatch, I do still think they've got to be more realistic and play to their strengths. And for me, right now, their strengths are playing on the transition, as we've seen when Newcastle are at their best. Now, this was a question from Bangkok Jack, and Phil Downey asked something along similar lines. How will the Manchester City case last week affect Newcastle United? Will we see a big Saudi sponsorship deal? Now, this was something I touched on in my Newcastle Confidential column last week, and of course, on the back of Manchester City, it's my job as a journalist to ask those questions and try to get the inside track. Now, the word coming back is that no, we shouldn't expect to see all of a sudden next week a £100 million training kit sponsorship deal announced with Riyadh Airlines. That was never Newcastle's intention in the first place. And even the news last week, I think, was misinterpreted by some as this was a green light to go and sign these vastly inflated sponsorship deals. It's not. The rules are going to stay there. APT, with regards to the PSR calculations, that's here to stay. I think Manchester City's victory is in that the mechanics around it are going to be easier to get these deals through. This is something I've written about before. For example, one such rule change that was attempted to be brought in last year was that, say, for example, you had a £25 million shirt sponsorship deal with the seller on the table. The Premier League wanted you to go away and get 4 or 5 other deals to the same value to prove that was market worth, and that's just nonsense. If you sell your house for £500,000, you don't need 4 other guys in the street willing to pay the same amount. So it's little things like that have been proven to be unlawful and will be changed. So it will make it easier for Newcastle. But no, I don't expect all of a sudden them to put a zero on the end of the seller deal and to bring in these, like I say, vastly inflated sponsorship agreements. Now, there is scope for more in terms of Saudi involvement, certainly a training ground, a training kit sponsor, and that is the way we all know Newcastle are going to push back on the boundaries of PSR. So yes, there will be more, but not, I don't think, on the back of these rule changes we're going to see, like I say, obscene amounts of money and Newcastle clearly bending the rules. That was never their intention. They wanted to be strategic. They wanted to be with evolution, with growth over a longer period. So to answer the question, no. Now this next question is from William Dixon, and he asks, who, in my opinion, should Newcastle go out and sign in January and beyond? Well, for me, the priority position, and I said this in the summer, it's got to be right winger. When the Saudi takeover came 3 years ago, Newcastle needed the right winger. They need the right winger in the window after that, the window after that, and the window after that. They still need a right winger. It's the one position they haven't even attempted to address. The two players who operate in that position now are Jacob Murphy and Miguel Almiron, players the new ownership inherited. Now, to that end, and this was always my frustration with Newcastle going out and signing Harvey Barnes last summer. I like Harvey Barnes. I've made that perfectly clear, and he's certainly shown his value coming off the bench more than starting. By the way, this season, that question remains: is he actually a better impact sub? But nonetheless, that was £38 million that, for me, should have been spent on a starter, on a right winger, not a player, and a very good player, but not one who would come in and out of the team in a position where Newcastle already had Anthony Gordon. So for me, to answer the question again, the priority has to be a right winger. Now, who would that be? Well, we saw Semenyo down at Bournemouth, didn't we, at the start of the season? Now, is he the answer to take Newcastle to the very top and back into the Champions League and competing on that level? I honestly don't know, but I certainly think he's better than what Newcastle have got. And should they be able to go out and buy Bournemouth's right winger? Well, yeah, they probably should do. Now, some of you might be shouting back at the screen that I've made a hell of a song and dance of late about a striker. And yes, I do think a striker is a priority, but given they've now invested in the Will Osula project, that ship has probably sailed for now, I would imagine. My issue with that is that they should have gone out and signed a player for £10 to £15 million, not one who cannot play. As we saw in the last game, it was screaming in the second half there for Newcastle to bring on a striker, a centre forward whose position by trade is that, and they just wouldn't. And he was sat there, and that's not a criticism of Osula. Maybe that is where he is at right now, and you've got to trust what Eddie Howe and others are seeing. But yeah, I just think a right winger is the one area of the pitch where you can actually really go out and make a definite, immediate improvement to the starting 11. Next question from Paul M. Will Callum Wilson be replaced in January? Now, Callum Wilson very nearly went last January. There was interest from Atletico Madrid, I think a tentative inquiry from AC Milan as well, and I think Callum was open to go. And even going into the summer, there was certainly an expectation that he would move on. Now, perhaps it was that the back injury suffered in late July put pay to that. And the problem I've got with this, going into January, because that's the question, now, I don't see a scenario whereby Callum Wilson is sold, because for him to go, to be a buyer, he's got to be fit. But if he is fit, will Newcastle and Eddie Howe not convince themselves that Wilson being there and available is probably perhaps worth keeping for 6 months until the end of the season, given the difficulty in bringing in someone of his ability? Now, you might argue back, if he's fit, it's time to cash in, take the few £1 million you can get before his contract is up next summer and try and invest that. I just don't see that happening for now, in part because there's every chance that Callum will perhaps be out of the team again by January. Let's hope that is not the case, though. And all the word I've got at the moment is that he should be in the squad for Brighton. He's expected to train this week. Him and Isaac are both on course for that. And wow, do Newcastle need it, because I've made my feelings known about Callum Wilson on these videos in recent years. I thought Newcastle was signing a good player from Bournemouth. I didn't realise they were signing an excellent player. The frustration is, of course, the availability. Now, this is another question which talks to Manchester City's legal challenge against the Premier League last week, and it's from Rich. And do I think the uncertainty around PSR and APT has delayed the club's announcement over their plans for a new stadium, i.e. could a rule change their thinking? No, I don't think it has. I just think there's been a delay because they're trying to get the ducks in the row for what I'm increasingly believing now will perhaps be an attempt to move into Leazes Park. And that isn't straightforward. That isn't easy. I think there's been a recognition on the inside now that a new stadium is needed. They don't want to go. They don't want to leave and move down to a river or out to Pontyl under Blythe or wherever it may be, or even the town moor. I think they want to stay on the site. Now, is it possible to expand St James's Park? Yes, it is, but I think even I've come around to this way of thinking now as well, and certainly when this was first floated a year, 18 months ago, I was very much definitely of the opinion Newcastle had to stay at St James's. I think, when you sat inside Goodison Park last week, and as much as I love Goodison Park, and you see what those guys are going to move into down by the river, there's a realisation that now you do need to move. And St James's, it's wonderful, it's fantastic, everything about it. I don't have to go over that, but is it fit for purpose in terms of being that really top class level of stadium that we see now around the world? And I was in Atlanta last summer, and wow, that just blew my mind. That stadium there, Mercedes-Benz, was like a little city in its own right. It was quite incredible. And I think if Newcastle can maintain that city centre location and that iconic spot up on the hill there, but do it by building just behind in Leazes Park. And as I revealed in my Newcastle Confidential column last week, the Freemen of the City, the council, are going to be absolutely key to this. The Freemen have been guests at St James's Park, and I'm led to believe that, there's been positive talks in that regard. I think that is the way the club will look to explore. Has the delay been because of the Manchester City case? No, I don't think it has. As I touched on earlier, the rules around APT and PSR aren't necessarily going to change drastically, where all of a sudden Newcastle can just stay at St James's Park and just pump in £1 billion to spend on players. I think for them to evolve and for them to compete and for them to push back on those PSR boundaries, they are going to need greater revenue streams. And one of the ways you do that is by having a bigger stadium to get more fans in, be that season ticket holders, corporate opportunities, everything else around it with regards to the retail, NFL, singers, whatever you want. They need a new stadium, and I think the reason it's been delayed is because of that realisation internally, and it's just such a big thing they have to get right, and they've got to get their ducks in a row in this. Now, I wrote the bit last week, 3 years of Saudi ownership. I was asked the question, are the Saudis or PIF still interested? After everything I looked into, and I spent weeks doing this, yes, absolutely. I think the interest is there. I think the asterisk is it was never going to be this sort of overnight project where they threw millions and billions of pounds at it instantly, in part because it couldn't be, but they don't want it to be that. And it will be a case of evolution, not revolution. But the one conclusion I came to is at the stadium and what they do with St James's Park or a new ground elsewhere. Now that will be the ultimate telltale sign as to how interested and how invested the Saudis really are in Newcastle United. Now I wonder if the architects who helped design this place, Helsinki Cathedral, are still around. They could certainly come in useful for St James's Park redesign, couldn't they? Yeah, wow. Next question. Now this is from Ethan Todd, and he said that I've mentioned before that the head has moved faster than the tail at Newcastle since the takeover. What needs to be tackled now as a matter of priority, the head or the tail? Good question. I always think you've got to go to the head. If you invest in the head, if you invest at the very front, then, pardon this analogy, I hope it works, but the head becomes the belly becomes the tail, and it filters down. As Kevin Keegan always said, buy better, improve your starting 11. I've already touched on it in these little wanderings around here, that my frustration is that some of the recruitment hasn't improved the starting 11, even going back to Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall last summer. Yes, very good players, and I think they'll be wonderful players for Newcastle over the next 5 to 10 years, let's hope so. But in the isolation of what Newcastle needed last season, it fell out of Europe. Of course, you can't argue with that now. I wrote the piece a year ago talking about why are Newcastle investing in cryptocurrency at the time when the need was for today, not tomorrow. I got a little bit of stick on the back of that article, especially as that night Newcastle went down to Manchester United in the League Cup, and Hall and Livramento were fantastic, but I stand by it, and I stand by it now as well. So, yeah, invest in the head, then everything else catches up. You've got to put the money at the front there in terms of improving the starting 11, and by extension, get the big sponsorship deals and get as much money as you can for that front of shirt sponsorship, training ground, training kit. That's the head. Build the new stadium. Invest in the head. Now, next question from What Am I Eating UK. Should Newcastle have taken a points deduction rather than sell Elliot Anderson and Yankuba Minte in the summer to comply with PSR? Now, what a question. And just to let you in on something. During this trip here to Helsinki, I've been covering England, and I bumped into a guy associated with Brighton, and he put this exact question to me. He said, why didn't Newcastle just take the points if it was going to be around 6? Now, we believe it might have been as much as 10, but he said, Yankuba Minte, from what they've seen so far, is worth a 6-point deduction. Now, it's a good question, and I think it's one certainly worth debating, but was it ever going to happen No, if Newcastle were hit with a points deduction, it wouldn't have been because of a strategic decision to do so. The message from the Saudis, very definitely to those inside the club at the end of June, was this problem had to be solved. The £70 million hole in the accounts had to be filled. Under no circumstance did they want to entertain the embarrassment of a points deduction. I get that. 3 years into their ownership for mismanagement to lead to, it is embarrassing, a 10-point deduction. You're as good as having to write a season off. So if Newcastle had have gone down that avenue, I don't think it would have been a good look at all. But Shakers, Bury, wow, that was timely. They know a thing or two about points deductions, don't they? Anyway, could Newcastle do with Elliot Anderson and Cube Minte? Absolutely. If you look at the midfield at the moment, and this talks to the earlier question in terms of that retention of the ball and needing those types of players, Elliot Anderson absolutely fits that. Technically wonderful. The Geordie Maradona, of course. Yankuba Minte, what position does he play? Right wing. What's the one position Newcastle needs a matter of priority? Right wing. So do they miss them? Could they do with them? Yes. But I don't think they were ever going to take a points deduction for that to remain the case. And finally, the last question comes from a user, Get2 by the Sea, who's got a lovely badge of Northumberland as his avatar. And I've taken his advice quite literally. And here I am, down by the port, down by the sea in Helsinki. And his question is, do I think Newcastle will go back in for Mark Guehi in January? And there was another question as well from another user, is it time for Newcastle to make a statement signing? Now, will they go back in for Guehi? If they are going to do that, and I'm led to believe it is still on the agenda, I think we'll have our answer within the first week. What we won't see is a situation like the summer where it drags on, where Newcastle go in at 40, 50 million pound, then come the last week of January, we're talking about failed 60, 70 million pound approaches. Now, Guehi has only got 18 months left on his contract come the new year. I think some, and this is from information inside Crystal Palace, were led to believe that it made better business interest for them as a club to sell Guehi in the summer. Steve Parish didn't agree, and he strung Newcastle along to a degree. And of course, there was the injury to the other centre half, which they bought, which complicated matters. Now he's due to return next month. So to that end, will it make sense for Palace to sell Guehi in January? I think it will. And certainly the asking price and the figures we're talking, from what I'm led to believe, won't be anywhere near the 60, 65, 70 million pound it got to. So if Newcastle knew a deal was there, their original valuation of around 45 to 50, now you may argue that's still too much, I don't know. I think we might see movement, especially if those conversations, which should be taking place now and into December, if there's an acceptance that they could move quickly and get it done without the public drama and the farce that was the transfer saga, rather, of the summer that never happened. So will they go back to Mark Guehi? It's definitely on the agenda, I know that much, but I think they'll try to determine exactly what the parameters of that deal are. And is it time for a statement signing? Well, Mark Guehi in his own right would be a statement signing. Of course, he started here last night for England, but certainly when we spoke to Paul Mitchell in the summer, the indication was, the impression that the days of going out and spending £63 million on Alexander Isak or £55 million on Sandro Tonali, they, for now, well, they were gone. Newcastle had to be more inventive, that to be clever with regards to the recruitment. So I do think there is still scope for the likes of a Guehi signing, but in terms of that huge, big statement addition, what you're talking there, a 60, 70, 80 million pound centre forward, no, I don't for now. Actually, guys, another question has just come in, and it would be amiss of me not to take you for a quick beer, so yeah, let's go. Well, guys, the final question to come in, and the answer brought you here from this quirky little craft ale bar, is do I think Harvey Barnes and Anthony Gordon can play together? I would love the answer to be yes, and certainly earlier in the season I was really strong in pushing for Newcastle just to play their best players, but the more we see, the more I perhaps come around to Eddie Howe's thinking, and Eddie Howe, I think, has been pretty strong on this, and that he believes Gordon's best position is left wing and Barnes' best position is left wing. I'm not going to disagree with that, and to that end, why would you then play Gordon out of position unless it's needed at centre forward, or play him on the right? I don't think Harvey Barnes can play on the right, given his trademark move is that dropping the shoulder and cutting in onto his right foot from the left. In this, again, I'm glad the question came in, because I use this phrase all the time. It talks to previous answers. Why did Newcastle sign a right winger? So to answer the question, finally, no, I'm becoming increasingly convinced that they probably can't play in the same team, and that is where we'll finish it for now, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this little reflection. I've got my nice craft beer there. Can you see it? Yeah. all £10 of it. It wasn't even a full pint, but it is very nice. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please hit like and subscribe and comment below the line. And I'll be back at the end of the week looking ahead to the visit of Brighton and, yeah, a certain Yankubi Mint Day. Okay, guys, one last little scan of this place. It's tremendous in here. Take care. Bye-bye.